St. Joseph.
Commanded to lay the 16th annual two-year review of the National Insurance Fund, Unemployment Fund, and Selected Fund of Barbados as Mr. Speaker, I am commanded to lay the 16th Actuarial Review of the National Insurance Fund, Unemployment Fund, and Severance Fund of Barbados as of December 31st, 2017.
Government business resumed.
Honorable Member for St. Michael's South Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I feel compelled to contribute to this debate and to rise in support of this bill. I want to say, first of all, based on all of the previous interventions, that a single piece of legislation cannot always cure or address all of the issues associated with a particular matter. I think we have to acknowledge that we must proceed, albeit sometimes in an incremental way. Sometimes we will be able to move by evolution and other times by revolution. But I think that what we do have to acknowledge is that it isn't on every occasion that we will be able, within a single bill, within a single piece of legislation, to account for all of the things that must be addressed in the area of what we are trying to do. And this came up in the debate today. The debate today suggests that this bill alone does not cure what we are trying to address. The Honorable Prime Minister, in her earlier intervention, made that very clear. It is clear from the debate that there's more to do. There are more partnerships to be strengthened, and there is a lot left in the area of justice reform, in the area of how we relate to young people and issues of substance abuse. And the other thing I want to say before I get into actually what is the one point that I rise to make builds on something that the Honorable Prime Minister also mentioned. I made the note before she spoke, but she was able to raise the point before I did, but it's something that I want to reiterate. It seems to me that Barbadians, the way that we've evolved, we've become very good at policing. And I don't say policing in the formal sense, before the Honourable Member for St. Joseph takes exception to my intervention. I'm not talking about policing in the formal sense. I'm talking about policing in the sense of holding others sometimes to an artificial standard, seeking to control and seeking to punish in a way that does not always meet our ends. And one of the reasons I feel that we've become so good at policing has to do with the society that we were called to create in the immediate post-independence period. And this is a point that I've had the opportunity or had cause to make in several other fora. That regrettably, the old education system, and I call it old because I have all faith that the Honourable Member for St. Michael's Southeast is taking the education sector in a new direction, along with the teachers, along with the other partners in this space, but that a new direction is required. But the old education system was concerned with building a polite society. I say all the time that it was meant to create the perfect colonial and post-colonial society. It was the model of slavery back when slavery existed. Barbados was used to show what a perfect slave society could look like, and thereafter what a perfect colonial or post-colonial society could look like. And it was perfected. And so when we created the education system of that time, we wanted to create a large, obedient, polite population and public service. And we were able to create a strong public service, a strong tradition of skill and compliance. But it seems that we haven't stepped too far away from that and too far away from what the current society now requires. And so that tradition in our education system and the way largely that many of us were raised allowed us to be able to correct, to critique, but less able to create. To correct, to critique, but less able to create. It is a challenge that we are grappling with as we confront issues of innovation and invention and making sure that the best new ideas are supported through things like access to credit and through things like incubators and accelerators and so on. But it is something that we grapple with because we have, in fact, become very good at policing and over-policing. We have, in fact, become very good at using a big stick, where a big stick is not always indicated. Sir, as someone who represents a constituency where several of my constituents have found their paths to success and their path to opportunity cut short because of a matter that saw them before the court and criminalized. I think that this bill is important. And I'm not going to go over all of the reasons that the honorable member who introduced the bill went through and that others have also done. But I do want to call some attention to one area of the bill that others have mentioned, and to support the call by the member for St. James North and others to look at the expanded role and therefore the need for expanded resources of the National Council for Substance Abuse, if this is in fact the role that they will be expected to play. I think that we all acknowledge and recognize the role of the NCSA. But that role has not traditionally been what is expected in this bill. And that's why I made the point when I rose that a single piece of legislation cannot in itself always address what needs to be done. There's institutional strengthening and there are resources that are going to be required as we go forward and as we bring this to reality. But apart from the NCSA, there are other actors who also historically have perhaps had more interaction with the population that this bill would be seeking to address and to interact with. And I think of Verdon House and others, and the fact that there are largely private and third sector entities that are going to have to be strengthened. I imagine that when some of these young people are referred to NCSA, that NCSA themselves are going to have to do some referral. Because I'm not sure that today as we speak, and I'm sure that the Honorable Member for Christchurch East, the minister who has responsibility for that area, is continuing the work now to strengthen that role for NCSA. But I'm not sure that today they will be able to do that. And I think it means that we have to look more fully, not just at the public sector provisions or institutions for this. That's why I always say that partnerships are important. We are not going to be able to address this issue just as government. We are going to need to make sure we have strong partnerships with other institutions that are going to be able to contribute to making this happen. I have to say that one part of the bill that is associated with this that I do commend is the distinction between adult and juvenile, if that is still the nomenclature, offenders. Because I do think that one of the things that we've realized is that there's a difference between starting to consume marijuana when you are 11 or 12 and starting to consume marijuana when you're 35 or 40. There's a difference. There's a difference in terms of how you are able to develop. There's a difference in terms of how you're able to interact with people around you. I believe and there are others in here more learned than me, that the science suggests that there is a difference. And so I think it's important that the bill makes that distinction and seeks to refer young people who are consuming marijuana to make sure that they understand the implications of what they're choosing to consume. Now, this point was first made to me, and it is the reason that I insisted on rising to speak on this bill, because this point was first made clear to me by someone who spent most of her life, all of her adult life, working as a substance abuse therapist and psychologist, and who just before she died 7 years ago, last month would have been 7 years ago, was about to read for her PhD in psychology with a special emphasis on substance abuse. And that person was my sister. And Mr. Speaker, I thank you for allowing me to call her name, Gail Cattle, because she is a big part of the reason why I actually got involved in representative politics, because I saw that the work that she was doing, in particular with young men, but also with young women, with young men and their families, because this issue does not just affect the single young person. But I saw that the work that she was doing was community work. It was about meeting people where they are in communities and being able to work with them to understand some of the reasons why they do not always find themselves accessing the opportunities that the rest of us do. And Gail is the reason that I got involved in politics. One of the reasons, but one of the very strong thrusts behind me wanting to continue her legacy and work with communities. But one of the things that was very clear to me from her work at Verdun House and from her work in her private practice with families is that people that often present with what we call substance abuse issues or what we call addiction issues do not only have substance abuse issues or addiction issues. Sir, you would know this very well. And so Gail used to talk all the time about this issue of co-occurring pathologies. Co-occurring pathologies, and the fact that while we stream people along a certain path to deal with this single issue of what we believe is addiction or what we believe is substance abuse, the truth is that people have so many other deprivations. People have so many other co-occurring mental health issues that even the system that is set up to deal with substance abuse is not sufficient to address a lot of what is required for them to address. And so the people who have dedicated their lives, and through Gail, I met a lot of her colleagues who do this work every day, who are on call 24 hours to be able to respond to some of these issues. There's something that struck me as I was giving the eulogy at Gail's funeral 7 years ago. When I looked around the church, I don't know if it's parliamentary to say worse, but that's what we used to say when I was growing up. The church was packed. And as I looked around Carrington Wesleyan, I looked up at the balcony as I was speaking, and I saw the faces that I had seen a few times over the years, but never all together in one place. And I saw the faces of young men filling up the balcony. People who probably don't usually set foot in a church, but who came, as they told me after, to honor and acknowledge the work that Gail had done with them in helping them to work through not just addiction, because in many cases, this addiction does not exist in a vacuum. It exists alongside economic deprivation. It exists alongside all other kinds of mental health pathologies that I'm not sure that we have built up the ecosystem to truly be able to address. It is an area that requires more resources, not just from the public finances, sir, but it also requires all of us, the medical fraternity, the third sector, the private sector, to really, truly develop a mental health ecosystem to be able to address a lot of these issues. And so, sir, the only reason that I stand here is really to be able, in addressing this bill, to honor the work that people like Gail have done, that continues to be so important, but to make sure that we do not lose sight of the fact that this is an area to be strengthened. You know, when most of the people that pass through the system with these issues are men, yes. In many cases, women's addiction issues are hidden for other reasons. And I won't go into all of those reasons because I know that we will have another opportunity in this honorable place to continue this conversation in a different way. But not only are women's addiction issues under-resourced and not as visible, but the young men, some of them not so young because they've carried these issues for a while, who have this challenge. And I'm talking not necessarily about consumption on its own. I'm talking about substance abuse or addiction, because they're two separate things and part of the same spectrum. But often their families are also involved in ways that can be very destructive and can be very exhausting emotionally and financially and mentally for the family. And so there's all that work that needs to be done. And so what we need to be able to do is to create a mental health ecosystem that includes addiction, that includes government, but is not only about government, that is not only about addiction, but that is about, as we talk about chronic NCDs and all of the other things that we need to grapple with, that we also have to talk about mental health. We have to not laugh at the manifestations of it. One day I was in Bridgetown, sir, with my sister, Gail, and a man approached us. And you could tell that he was an unsheltered individual, as we say, living on the streets. You could tell that he probably was undernourished and not well fed and was having those challenges. And our other sister said, he was walking towards us and Gail didn't move. She was just standing there waiting for him to come. And our other sister said, watch and see that Gail knows him. And so said, so done. He walked up and struck up a conversation and really just started to talk about some of the things that he was experiencing. But the truth is that most of us in that scenario would not think that he was possibly coming up to us for a conversation based on some common understanding or some common background. But it suggests to me that it becomes very easy for people to become invisible, for people to become a court file or a case file or fine. And that's why it's important in this bill, as we seek to refer people, that we don't refer them into a system that cannot truly address these issues. So I want to support the notion that we really need, as part of the Social Justice Committee and the social justice efforts, as part of the Ministry of Health and Wellness and whatever are the stakeholders, to come together to discuss that mental health ecosystem. We have to be able to go, sir, beyond policing, beyond correcting and critiquing. You know, before I sit, our policing is so, of people's behavior and the way they express is so complete that before we came back from the pause, from the break, sir, I saw some discussion about the hairstyle of a certain popular news anchor and the fact that so many people were up in arms about how this man could wear his hair like this. And a lot of the time, a lot of the policing that we do is not even according to the norms of our own culture. It is not even according to the norms of our own physical bodies as descendants of people who were formerly enslaved. It boggles the mind. And so people have to defend the way that their hair grows out of their head, because we are so concerned with policing people's bodies and people's behavior that we lose sight of what is important. So I, through you, sir, want to say to that young man that I love his hair. It reminds me a little bit of mine. And I am glad that we are having a conversation about how we can go beyond the big stick and start to invest the resources in ways that people need and that can be of greater help to them. And with those few words, sir, I'm obliged to you.
I remember your name was also mentioned in reference to the same article. Your name was mentioned quite often in it. I remember for St. James South.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I very much appreciate the discussions and debate that we've had so far on this particular topic. It is one that is important for us to address, and I want to thank the Honourable Member for St. Joseph for bringing this piece of legislation to help to change the social injustice that we have visited on the lives of others, simply because we did not understand what is the best way to deal with an issue, the best way to deal with a problem. And I will be short, Mr. Speaker, but I felt that I wanted to rise to speak to the fact that there's a complexity to governance that we cannot escape. That if you're going to build a good society, a society in which each person is going to be able to achieve their highest potential, if we're going to accommodate the individual while at the same time maintaining order, that it is not easy always to know where to draw the line or how to deal with matters. And then as the society evolves and it changes and circumstances change, it may challenge the way in which you have dealt with a matter in the past. And that is why the constant examination of who we are, where we're going, and how fit for purpose are the social systems around us, the laws around us, our way of doing things. Does this still continue to serve us in achieving our objectives? And so we've been growing. There are lots of things that we didn't know, that we didn't understand, and therefore we embraced and stayed stuck in the past, using approaches that maybe were not beneficial to our future. But at least the nation is gradually coming to a place where it recognizes that we have to press a reset button if we're going to build a society that works for all Barbadians. And I can tell you that as a legislator, having the opportunity to represent people in St. James South, having the opportunity to be a part of a team that represents the good people of Barbados, you recognize that everything is not as straightforward. And so I really appreciate the contributions that we had today from the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, St. Philip North, the Honourable Member for St. Michael West, the St. Joseph, etc., because they each spoke to things that we have to consider as we are going forward. Now, the reason why I feel we need to pay attention to it, not just the issue that is immediately before us, but the fact that we really are at a watershed moment in which major change has to come. COVID has taught us that. The changes in the financial system have taught us that. Climate change now is forcing us to re-examine how we've done a number of things. And this issue of marijuana and drugs and the freedom of the individual and the issues of public health, all of these speak to the fact that we need to do some reform and do something differently. So, one of the things that has stayed with me all of my life, a lot of us grew up in church, Mr. Speaker, and church was often presented as black and white. It was presented as you just say, "Thus saith the Lord," and you do. But as you grow into adulthood, you realize life is not as simple as that, and it does not work like that either. One of the things it took time to learn was that you can't legislate righteousness. It doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter how you police it. Unless people imbibe and hold on to the rule from the heart because they understand it, not because someone has commanded it, but they begin to understand this is for my health. This is for my well-being. So people are governing themselves from inside. And Mr. Speaker, it is one of the hardest things a society has to do. It is one of the hardest things for schools to be able to get done, for the police, for the prison, and for families. How do I get the individual to clearly understand the options that are in front of them? How do we teach them self-love and discipline so that they make choices that best work for them? There's no easy answer to that. And there is no law that is going to help us make that a reality. And that is why I appreciated what was shared by the Honorable Member for St. Michael Northeast, because the issue has to go back. If you're going to deal with complex social issues, you have to get back to your basics. Training, parenting, education, culture, music, what people are hearing on the media, what people are reading and ingesting. That if we don't sit down as a society and work out what kind of society do we wish to have, and then set about and put in place the planks that support the outcomes which we want to have, then we will not have a society that works. And how do you maintain the balance between the individual being able to do what he feels or cares to do with his social responsibility to control and discipline his behavior in a way that he's not adversely affecting himself and others around them? Even where people like to suggest that if a person has the choice or the ability to do what they feel like doing, the problem is when they create a problem for themselves, the society then has to pick up the cost of dealing with them, whether you're talking about becoming overweight, if you're talking about drug addiction, whatever it is, the society still has to cope with the choices that you have made and that have affected you directly, because we have a responsibility for each other. So it's not easy, Mr. Speaker. So I want to just state, and I want to make an appeal. This is going to take the whole country to be able to deal with this. One of the things that grieves me, because I know I had the privilege of being the chairman of the National Council on Substance Abuse. And I know the impact that marijuana can have on young minds, the impact it can have on a child's development. And therefore, as we deal with this legislation, as we take out the criminality from it in terms of imprisoning people for having doses, yes, we have to do the work on the other side. How are we going to educate and train and so on, so that parents, and the thing that we have today is that a number of young parents use marijuana. How do you help them to understand that they must not expose their small children to its effects, because it will have an impact, it will have an effect. And that is why the whole person approach towards health and wellness, etc., is going to be important. Now, as I was listening to others sharing about the experiences they had in their childhood, it reminded me of a practice that my mother had. And it is very pointed in relation to the moment that we have today. When we were children, you can run about and play, but at a certain time in the day, you have to come into the house and you have to go to sleep. When we got too old to go to sleep, you had to learn to sit quietly for an hour. And she insisted on that. She was a school teacher. And she insisted you have to sit quietly for an hour. I never understood why she did that, because all I want to do is play. But in later years, I learned the value of it, that being able to govern my emotions when I can't do what I really would like to do, being able to self-soothe so that I can focus, perhaps when things are boring in school, to be able to tell myself no when I need to make a choice that is different from my emotions. I learned the absolute importance of having that kind of discipline and mastery over myself so that my emotions don't push me to do things that in the long run will not work for me. And I've always appreciated that. And when I think of what we've been going through in COVID, we've had these spreads and clusters simply because people can't manage the discipline of, I can't stay inside all the time, I'm going to go crazy if I do. That discipline comes in handy. So therefore, I recognize that as a society, we have a really long way to go, and we need to give all the necessary support to our schools, to our parents, and to the National Council on Substance Abuse. And I just want to commend one particular program that they have that has worked very well, but it's too small to have the broad-based national impact that we would like it to have. And this is the project called Project SOFT. Project SOFT is a program that targets children who are moving from primary school into secondary school. Why? Because we know in the secondary arena, children are brought under more peer pressure. They might be introduced to drugs if they have not already been introduced at the primary level. And this is the area where they are most vulnerable as they're trying to shape and make decisions about who they are, where they're going, and what they want to do. This is the time when they want to fit in. And every year, the National Council on Substance Abuse used to have a camp for 40 children. And they would go do a residential camp in which children would be exposed to decision making, how to make friends. They would not only talk about drugs and the abuse of drugs, etc., but how to manage the whole transition from their primary education setting into that secondary education setting. And it was something that, when I was chairman, I really wanted to see us to be able to offer this to all children in that transition corridor when they're making that jump from primary to secondary. And so it is a program that I would want to commend to us as a country. It is one that I think that if we were to use it as a starting point, it would help us in working with our young people to be able to make the necessary choices. And one of the reasons why NCSA would have found this absolutely necessary is because of the reality, Mr. Speaker, of what is on the ground. In their reports, they share what are some of the findings that they have. And they found that a lot of the young people who needed to do drug counseling needed drug counseling around marijuana, and most of them were 15 years of age. 15 years of age. And when they examined the reasons why these 15-year-olds found themselves in the situation of the use of marijuana, it was because today, here where we are in 2021, that they come from families where there is use and abuse of illegal substances. And that is how these 15-year-olds now find themselves needing drug counseling, because they've come up in families It is not something that happened to them at school. It was not necessarily something that happened to them on the block or in the corner. They actually live in families where there's this abuse. And so if we're going to rein this in, if we're going to bring change to this nation and to this society, one, yes, we need this legislation. We need to remove the issue of going to jail because that worsens the problem, Mr. Speaker, as you well know, and has been said by honorable members in here. But we then have to go the extra step now. What are the things that we're going to put in place as a society now to help us manage the fact that we can no longer put our children in cotton wool, stick them in a room and lock them down to keep them away from that which might be evil. We have to arm them with the skills, the outlook, the perspectives that help them to navigate a world that presents everything possible to them, that has no respect whatsoever for their tender age, has no respect whatsoever for the fact that they have not reached a stage where they can make good decisions because they've got the social media bringing everything to them. That you have the television bringing everything to them. In the wider society, they're bombarded in a way that we were not bombarded as children. And therefore, it commands our compassion and it commands our energy and our commitment to look to see what is it we need to do to arm this generation of Barbadians and this generation of Barbadian parents, that we can better navigate a changing world in which we need to make the very best choices so that we have good self-love and that we are armed with good discipline that we can be successful. So I fully support the bill, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker, for your indulgence.
Honorable Member Sir Michael East. You need to turn on your mic, sir.
Okay. I'd like to be up to date, sir. This equipment need to be modernized. Sir, I just want to add my voice to this discussion because I really believe that apart from those who have been the decision makers on these issues, that I have to take into consideration the persons and the use of the substance that we're talking about. Who are the people that are usually charged for these substances or this specific substance? What is their opinion about what it is we're doing? I want to use an equilateral approach, not believing that I have any special authority, but if we're really looking at trying to create the kind of, as I mentioned before, the government must have a trajectory. And if I'm trying to build a perfect world or trying to build an ideal type of society, I must know what I'm trying to do. And I'm trying to include as much persons and make them feel as an integral part of the development of the society itself. There are substantial number of persons in Barbados and in the Caribbean that smoke marijuana, that cook with marijuana, that drink marijuana tea, and to me, the debate is clouded by who smoke and how much you can smoke and how much cigarettes you can get. When men in possession of this item, that they once described as a drug, most persons start off with the bias that is a drug. We have not been able to eliminate that totally from the psyche as yet. So everybody hedging about how far we should go and if we are correcting a social wrong. It is a social wrong where it had no economic value. It was a social wrong where it had no medicinal value. Now all of a sudden the debate is a debate that you're trying to sanitize, you want to make it wholesome. So you want to discuss marijuana, and people know how much you should have in your possession at a specific time. And the people that talk it should drink brandy, whiskey, got whiskey in the house. The children are around the whiskey bottle. The children don't touch the whiskey bottle. That is so, but all of a sudden now, a factor in the discussion is it would be around to have parents having marijuana smoking in the house and not any discipline. How come you got all of it? Wait, what's the names of these things they got now, right? Campari, Malibu, Hennessy, Scotch whiskey. Some got one label, one got a color for one label, another color for the next. All of these things, and you go buy special furniture to put these drinks in the house and exhibit, and the children be seeing it all the time. They see you drinking it. You see us doing all kind of things in the house. Your friends coming in, well-respected people of great importance in the house drinking this thing, and still the children don't drink any. The children don't drink any. But all of a sudden there's a big issue. We acknowledge now that marijuana has value. And because you're trying to please certain people across the society, that smoke it too, you know. But fortunate to be able to conceal it, that they smoke it, and probably drink it too, and use for other activities as well too. And these people now want to make judgments on how much you should use. If we accept that it has medicinal value, and if we accept that traditionally our people used to use it, Indians, but the Europeans had a little silence. Africans, all the people across Latin America, the Mayas, the Aztecs, the Caribs, the Incas, everybody used to use this thing. This was something that was holy. This was holy. Everybody used this thing. During the period of slavery and colonialism, people decide what is legal, what is not legal. And if you do certain things, you receive a harsh punishment. I still believe that we are fortunate to be here at this juncture. And if we are going to approach these matters, we approach the matters in a very holistic manner. Wide discussions by all of us on what this specific substance is used for. Don't tell me about the opinion of an institution that used to judge it before as a drug and stigmatize and condemn people for using it and was offering treatment, because there's nothing that has happened that purged these people overnight to make them understand they must now appreciate this thing. So when they're using their judgment, don't care what words they do use, the reality is that they already hold a bias. And if you're going to say you can use 14 grams or less without going to jail, straight up, without being imprisoned or incarcerated, whatever word you want to use, but jail, get up the dodds. End up with a so-called negative mark on your certificate of character. Sometimes find it hard to even find enough money to get a good lawyer to come and defend him for being in possession of a 5-bag. You get charged for a 5-bag, or probably 2 or 3, but it's still in your pocket. Judgment is made. Even if a fine is put on you, the people that we're talking about, that we want to include in this just society, they now have to look for $200 because you believe that they're doing it wrong. If you you are trying to modernize and democratize a society. And you are of the opinion that there's nothing wrong with having that figure. Why are you putting a fine on it? Why are you putting a fine on it? The chances are that the man that you put the fine on can't pay any money anyhow. And then next week, if he's a drug addict, if it's just a habitual thing that he likes, you can put another one, you can get another one to smoke. So you can go about 3 or 4 cases before the court, because signals are going out that there's some gradual attempt to upset this. But there are other persons in the society that will go beyond what is overtly being shown. If there is a reservation, because there are certain institutions and so-called significant persons in Barbados that is strongly opposed to what we are doing, then it has to be said. Because I strongly believe that if we are very open-minded and objective about what we're doing, then we can't allow these fears to stop us from doing what is right. When I left here today, probably would have taken the same position. When I left here today, I received 4 calls. And a community that probably figured that it should have some input in what the people that are drafting these bills and amendments to bills. Look, this bill, we draft it, and people who are gradualists want to take 20 years to get to a point that you should get to in 20 seconds. So 14 ounces, no more.
14 grams.
14 grams, no more. And you will pay a fine. That is my simple understanding as a layman. You will pay a fine. You take 14, but pay a fine. Police hold you because you're smoking. And pay a fine. Because that's the assumption that the police is going to make. But you are saying that this is an item, a commodity, that all of a sudden people in modern science and everything accept all the medicinal value of this thing. Other people smoking it for years, going to jail for it for years, and tell you about the effects of the use of marijuana. Some tell you about the Bajan ganja. Some tell you about the Jamaican ganja. Some tell you about the Vinci ganja. And these men, based on their own experience, the same way that people do with a vaccination, at the end of the day, I test it, and you can't test it from the fowl, just test it on human beings. You already have the evidence that it is useful. Many people that spoke probably today, and some outside this room, used it, and you're still using it. But all of a sudden, Parliament itself, rather than I talk it freely, but talking freely, Parliament itself got to be hedging and waiting for a 20-year process in order to come to a position that the intellect allows you to have the required foresight to know that the only way you are going to develop an egalitarian society where everybody feels an equal interest in the society and an equal part of the society is if you reach a specific point. Based on the conversations which I have had, the very body of persons, not only talk about Rastafarian communities, you go by the magistrate court any day, and you look and see who are the people being charged for the smoking of marijuana. If they had to take up sometimes the exhibit, the police can hardly hold the thing in his hands. to show this is what the man had. And then you damage an individual for a lifetime. Can't get a job at the sanitation department. The sanitation, at the level of management at the sanitation, you can't get a job if you went to prison for smoking. NCC, without weed whack in the hole. You can't get a job. What kind of just society is that? MTW, you can't get a job because you smoke a Smith. What can I get called? You smoke one of these things and they caught you. So you're acknowledging it. A man got the bag. We know somebody going to supply it to. So let me have a wide debate on these issues. Because if a man is allowed to move with 14 ounces or less, grams or less, eh? Well, as a matter of fact, I would prefer you to grant permission for them to have that and don't even have to pay a fine. Because I strongly believe that nobody should be in possession of 14 grams or less and go pay a fine, $200. And it's a whole set of big people sit down around a table before it even get cabinet or parliament. And all of these people, 29 in here or 30 in here, they all the draft men. And this is where we at. This is where we at. And at the end of the day, you're going to see the same amount of cases going before the court. The only difference is going to be that the government will receive $200 from each man as a result of being in possession of 2 ounces, 2 grams, 1, 12, and 11. With a revenue earning exercise. And that is how all I am saying, in fact, I am echoing. All I'm saying is what other people have been calling me within the last 2 to 3 hours and telling me. The newspapers already all around Barbados, running through the whole country, asking the Rastafarian community for their opinion. Asking you in Barbados, do you consider this to be progressive legislation? We inching along. And although you might say it is an inch, it is not good enough. It is not good enough. And I said it before. I said it before about another piece of legislation that came in here. And there are only few persons going to speak the truth. I'm not suggesting that anybody tell lies, but there are only few people going to speak the truth about all mankind. If it wasn't so, nobody would be questioning ethics, morals, reasonableness. None of them things so wouldn't be in the dictionary at all. I cannot see this as a major step and a fundamental change. The thing about this is that at the end of the day, somebody has to now supply the marijuana too. So you're going to be accepting it. Because the man that going to fight back, got to get it from somebody. And the man ain't going to plant. I don't know if it's possible to get a plant that you give you. You plant one tree a yard. Huh? So you're not a holistic analysis of the realities that we're experiencing. That there got to be men planting it out there. And if men now feel that they can pay a little fine, somebody or so, that could do it. But they're going to look for a supplier. Are you then cultivating an environment that allows then for people to plant and grow? If it is yes, because you can do it shortly, especially if the state looking for revenue, foreign reserves and everything, you can do it. And then you got another problem by your hand. Because we're not addressing the fundamentals, because why should people fear to speak? I hear the Prime Minister say just now, I accept all types of views, even from me. Even from me, right? I don't feel that, as the old people say, I don't feel like hairy pumpy, huh? I don't feel so. Hmm? But if the Prime Minister said, speak, and I personally believe that is the approach, that is the kind of paradigm that we must set in a house, especially when we win 30 seats at the polls. And you don't want to face the charge at the appropriate time, as though you're getting legitimate seats in one party state. Because they're here. When on the eve of a specific date, very soon, the debate, if the other party got anybody capable, the debate will emerge. That the people last time gave legitimacy to a one-party state, and that this government abused the democratic process. Some people could not talk. Some people would get fired to talk. Some people cannot, you can hear it. But this is all I hear. I am here to express the views of the people to whom I represent. I don't, even if I didn't get the national support of the Rastafarian community or the national support of the working class, I represent a constituency with working class people. I am not stupid. I know that they smoke. I know that men smoke. Why I can tell you that I never smoke? But somebody can tell you, I don't know what those fellas who smoke this and smoke that and drink alcohol. What is the difference between a man who goes into a rum shop and consume a pint and a half bottle of ASAF's Cockspur? What's the difference? To a man who smokes, and you don't put the man who drink all of that, abuse everybody, his mother, his father, his friends, he says something bad about God. Nobody don't lock him up. Nobody don't lock up the man. I had an uncle, and when the man drink, I lived inside a rum shop, and when the man drink, the man cursed me, my mother, everybody in the house. And the next morning, his friend and family are welcome. And they got other people to drink, and he's going to carry them home, and where they live, nobody don't see when they get left out the car. I'm saying, if we are going to demonstrate that this is a progressive government and we are moving towards certain changes, it is so unfortunate that we come with these minor amendments to a bill and want to beat ourselves on the chest of doing something very progressive. I heard about 6 members of parliament arguing about something which is minor. It does not make sense. Because the reality is that the people out there at the level where they can make their own judgment. So if we're going to come here today, and I believe this is the only bill I believe so far, if we're going to come here today for something as important as this, you think that everybody should be dressed up in a suit and their best dresses, hairdos, and putting on masks and cologne and put cologne and shoes and things. I come here to this, make an adjustment for this. Huh? To be truthful, I don't even want to describe it anyway, because I don't want to appear not to be grateful to the efforts of the AG. But the reality is that this could be better. There are other aspects. There are other aspects in the Drug Act that we could have looked at and made the required adjustments. And when I hear other people saying how much liberty is given to a man in St. Lucia and St. Vincent and Jamaica, and how you can have over 50 grams and don't have to pay no fine. Progressive Barbados, say you got a maximum of 14 and you got to pay a fine, and then if you don't pay the fine, what's going to happen? What is going to happen? And if it happened 2 or 3 times, what's going to happen? So we need to clean the record. We need to clean the record. We got to hold, and another thing I say this, it might not be this legislation, but we are dragging our feet too long on allowing the judiciary to make decisions because you have not made the required adjustment at the level of the legislature. To allow a man to spend time in jail for these matters. From the time we gave that commitment, sir. We gave that commitment. And that commitment is like complementing the other things in the Drug Act. Because at least you wouldn't be able to say that it's not my responsibility. The judiciary made the decision. Every day in the newspaper, it is like there's madness in the judiciary. One body go around there for committing a felony, and the judge let the man go home. A man going to teach 2 tins of corned beef, and so I'll tell you, they do like macaroni, they throw it hot water for the swallow. Right there? Ramen. A man going there for take up some ramen. And the man, they got the man holding in a cell for 2 or 3 days for ramen. We know the man hungry. So these are certain realities. We don't have to behave like the way how other people in the Commonwealth, or more so in the country which enslaved and colonialized us. We don't have to behave like them, because we know that the Caribbean, that we have our own unique conditions. And the most of the time we are in the position that we're in, right now we have this COVID thing going on across Barbados. You know how many people in Barbados that we got a package now? But you think the package can last for 3 weeks? These are realities. They get the package now. 2 weeks from now, especially if the house got in 5 or 6 children, and sometimes you hear in Barbados there's houses with 12, and there are houses with 17, and 27. These are Caribbean realities of landless people, of poor people. And when we begin to, the people who are drafting and the people who are making assessment of the provisions in the draft must look and see how this thing has been amended and also adapted to suit the circumstances of the Caribbean people and the Barbadian people. Or not, you're still leaving another problem will emerge, or the same problem that you're purporting to be addressing, the same problem will be perpetuated because of their own negligence in not making the right adjustments at the specific time. And that is what is happening. I really believe, third saying, this thing is something that should go back to the drawing board. It is a bit unfortunate that we can have all of these important issues. I don't even want to get into, because I don't want to stretch the debate to talk about the economic benefits and the difference in, I watch how poor people work hard in cane grounds my mother used to live in Hackett Hall, and I used to watch my mother friends in the King Brown. I used to watch a big stupid man, I know I can't call his name here, a big stupid man with a bullwhip, because he want to enforce what he expects. The plantation, the old barns, the old sugar barns, from the Bell and Lower State, Drax Hall, some of these men felt they should enforce pressures on their own in order to do what they believed was right. Because they were called, maybe called hearts, overseers, and ill-treat people. We cannot adopt the overseer model. When we see things that are wrong, that is, when we see things that are wrong, we have to decide that this is wrong. You see, when you got people allowing cowardice to govern them, you end up with the Americans doing what they want to do in Haiti. You got people doing like what the Americans want to do in Cuba, what they want to do in Venezuela. When they're ready, they will fly in a plane, snatch up anybody, come down here, and you feel that they've got reasons to be international police, snatch you up, cap these states, and these governments can't say anything. You got to CARICOM, you got all kinds of treaties, you have to be able to speak. But the only thing you can do is talk. The only thing you can do is talk. I can't change nothing. Even if you want to be fair, so you vote, President. Vote how you like. You know he love you, he respect you. Vote how you like. When they vote, how else they vote with me? So I feel that there's something that we must change in our political culture. That still, especially because of the unique nature of the success of this party coming into government, we must find a way of not just hearing ideas, but when we hear the ideas, we just bring the ideas together and at least find a way of forming a synthesis out of the whole pool of ideas that we're receiving. And so look, this is really the true view of the majority of people at this level. My view must not be the view by the draftmen. The system excludes me from any amendment to the draft. And because we inherit that from Westminster, we got to act. This is what the draft will bring. And this is what the rest of people that in here, that's part of the echo chamber, saying different words, same meaning. And then the society is be governed by that. The society be governed by that. So I don't even want to make reference. You know these things. But sometimes you hear things here, but then in another place, at another time, in another profession, you have to strip the same things apart in a search for true justice. I should be able to strip these things apart in search for true justice. And just like a judge or a magistrate can say, well, I'm not going to make the decision today, but I will come back to you around the 25th of March. And when they come up, because it is search for justice. I really believe that we have to move to that level. Or not.
You have 2 more minutes, I remember.
Or not, sir. We're going to have legislation coming. Everybody, you're gonna drink a brandy. You're going to smoke something to really muster the required courage. So that shows you the good in it. You have to smoke something to get the required courage to be able to hold another perspective and go home and sleep comfortably knowing that nobody is lighting a fire on your mattress. And then they might say, well, you know, somebody might plea Florida and say that, you know, at the time when he said that, he was intoxicated or he was under the influence of the smoking of the marijuana from Vince marijuana. Like, sir, I really begging that at least let us be an integral part of the process. And I don't know what other views were expressed, but if it went back 3 or 4 times, when it gets here, we hear all these different reservations, go back the 5th time, or 6 more times. I rush up here today knowing that regardless of what I say, I would be ineffective. Something wrong with the system, sir. Something wrong with the system. And I know that there are other persons here who agree with me. If they make the assessment the way that they ought to. Because there might just be a few little changes in the bill, but this thing is massive. This thing excludes some important elements that need to be addressed. You're addressing social issues. I don't mind what the draft people write on or type on paper. They're talking about issues. And instead, I listen to the debate today, which is about who smoke or who don't smoke. I see me put the thing in food already. I been said I got a coal and been use it. And if we encourage it in one way, on principle, what you're encouraging, when in order for me to be a consumer, they got to be a supplier. And if it's a supplier, you got to import or you got to plant. You got to import or you have to plant. So how much am I going to be allowed to plant? If we, at this stage though, where we're going to allow them to use it, whether, because the 14 grams is about probably for either people, you could call it whatever you feel like, sacramental, recreational, or whatever you get, you call it you feel like. But there must be a supplier. And if legislation before don't allow a man who is perceived as a Rastafarian, however you work out your definition, because I can't be a Rastafarian with the kind of assessment that the Barbadian public makes. Because you can only got locks if it's a Rastafarian, right, in Barbados. I can't tell you that I got a little room in the back, and this rich part has used my thing for sacramental purposes. This thing is so confusing. We need clarity, sir. Sir, I respect the time that you gave me because I didn't even know what you say, you know. I didn't know what you say. But there's so many different things that we have not even touched on as yet. And my view is that there should have been also a comparative assessment. This CARICOM thing, and St. Vincent doing one thing, and St. Lucia doing another thing, and the judiciary in Trinidad doing something that's different. And if I was doing this in Trinidad, this is what would have happened. And if I was doing this in St. Vincent, there is no, at the level of the judiciary, the same way every Commonwealth country followed British law. You mean the Commonwealth can't come up with a mechanism that is a consistency based on some precedent or some statutory provision that allow us to be guided so that all the time people can look at it and say, look, there's a consistency in the governments across the CARICOM level. A little ad hoc thing because this is my jurisdiction, this is my sovereignty. This is mine here, this is mine there. Everybody doing something different. So that's why I could come and tell me what is happening in Trinidad. Tell me what is happening in St. Vincent in relation to this matter. What is happening?
I remember know you on time.
Right?
I remember know how it's been your time.
I'm glad that you
know
allow
how it's
me.
been your time.
Sir,
You're in a different place.
I was
sir.
about to tell you that I am grateful I'm grateful because there's so much limited ideas about these things that I'm very grateful to have an individual who can appreciate that sometimes you would allow me a little space to at least try to find my way in the conversation in the House of Assembly. So I'm not going to encroach further and further on the liberties that you've given me.
Because you know that's an offense if you encroach.
No, but I'll tell you, I'm not going to do that, sir. I might put in another place. I'd be in difficulty because I was still going to ask you when you step off if you could talk to me. Thanks very much for the opportunity to speak.
Member for St. Joseph. You can turn on.
I find it possible to believe that the last member who spoke was feeling his way through anything. Mr. Speaker, it's been an interesting day and an interesting debate. We've had views that appear to be contrary because they represent possibly a disapproving view. And we have had a view that is disapproving perhaps, but for another reason. One side thinks that we shouldn't do it, the other side thinks that we're not going far enough. Any democracy, Mr. Speaker, thrives on dissent. Dissent is healthy. And I'm honored to be a part of an organization, as the Prime Minister said, that takes into account both sides. This bill is not an act of cowardice. It is not an act of recklessness either. We will no more encourage school children to engage in use of any drug. We would not encourage school children to be reckless with their health. And at the same time, we say clearly that we would not approve of people breaking the law of the land. But you know, sir, government forces all of us to consider both sides and to come up with a side that provides us with a workable solution with a minimum of friction and waste. And you know, sir, I don't know that there's anything that a political party or a government will do that will receive 100% support of everybody. And we have to accept that. At the time of independence, there was a large lobby that suggested that we were not ready for independence. But today, sir, Independence Day represents to us the centerpiece of who we are. History was the ultimate decider. And today, there'll be people who have reservations about this particular measure. There are those who think that we have set out on a march towards full liberalization of the use of cannabis, and there are those who think that we are spineless people for not coming right out and saying that we're going to liberalize. But that is what being in government is, sir. Somebody said to us in a cabinet session, when we invited somebody to come and speak to us, that if we find ourselves in a position where nobody disagrees with us, it is likely because they are afraid to. We welcome the debate, and we welcome the views. But I wish to assure all those who have reservations about what we're doing that we have, in fact, looked at all sides to this issue and have tried to come up with a solution that works. Remember who just spoke, asked the question, why are we stopping at 14 grams? And again, there's a perfectly rational reason for it. Under our Act, 15 or more grams is considered to be a trafficable amount. Or what's the other term? Or that you intend to supply. Possession, but both of which are considered to be especially grave and can attract very high fines. So we had to find what was the amount above which we could not go. And yes, you could argue that we could be like St. Vincent and increase that amount, but we still have to ask ourselves, what is the culture that we are inculcating in Barbados? And there are people, I suppose, who want to walk around with pockets bulging with marijuana, and there are others who prefer to walk around with their pockets bulging with whatever. But whatever we do, we have to try to work within the established benchmarks and the norms. I've said on the matter of the judiciary that there's a very good reason why we have the doctrine of separation of powers. And while it isn't specifically relevant to this debate, I feel that taking into account what was just said, that I need to recapitulate for the members of this chamber. The day the executive of this country starts to tell judges who to lock up, who not to lock up, how much a fine should be, we will have set out on a slippery slope. Because this is only seen in the light of some act of kindness or beneficence. But if you could tell a judge who to lock up or who to fine, who not to lock up or who not to fine, you could also tell him who to lock up and who to fine. And we run the risk of a society where a politician making a phone call to a court will determine the fate, one way or another, of a citizen, and that is not a place that I want to occupy. Mr. Speaker, the one thing that I want to clarify from the bill, because it appeared to the member for St. James North not to have been made clear, has to do with the matter of the expungement of your record. And the language in the bill is normative, and it says that if you are convicted, we are not saying if you are convicted from now henceforth, as long as you have a conviction for that amount of cannabis or less, and you have paid your fine or done your time, whatever it is, you are by this bill deemed to have been rehabilitated, and that record is no more. So somebody who in 1971 had a charge and a conviction for having 10 grams of cannabis, when this bill becomes law, he will be deemed to have been rehabilitated and his record expunged. He will not have to go and complete the documents and do all kinds of things. We are, by virtue of this law, expunging the record so long as the penalty has been paid. Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt that between now and when this matter reaches the Senate, the other place, that there will be public discussion. I didn't know that they were running around today trying to ask people what is their view of the legislation. I look forward to their comments. Some will say yes, some will say no. But guided at all times in this process, the Cabinet of Barbados determined that the interests of Barbadians in preserving their opportunities and in not being criminalized for what are essentially minor amounts of cannabis is where our focus should be. The time may come when we look to do otherwise. The time will come when we have a referendum, and all of Barbados will be able to stand and say where they stand on the subject. I have no doubt that there'll be people for and against. But whatever else may be on the horizon, we must always respect the views of the people and respect each other's views. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a second time.
Question that the aforementioned bill be read a second time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg that you do not leave the chair and that this House resolve itself into committee for further consideration of this bill.
Question is that the Speaker do not leave the chair and the House resolve itself in the committee for further consideration of this bill. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Oh,
This House is now in committee.
Clause 1.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that we do amend clause 1 by change, Madam Chairman, that we make an amendment to clause 1 to reflect that this bill will now be a 2021 bill and not a 2020. So we would amend clause 1 by changing 2020 to 2021. And with that amendment, I beg to move that clause 1 stand part.
The question is that clause 1 stand part with amendment. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 2.
Beg to move that clause 2 stand part.
Question is that clause 2 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clause 3.
Beg to move that clause 3 stand part.
Question is that clause 3 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Schedule.
Beg to move that the schedule be the schedule to the bill.
Question is that the schedule be the schedule to the bill. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report. Passing.
Beg to move that you do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee.
Question is that I do not report to His Honor the Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
With amendment. The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill with amendment in committee.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be read a third time.
The question that the bill be read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do not pass and be cited the Drug Abuse Prevention and Control Amendment Act 2021.
Question is that the bill be passed and so cited. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. Me think the ayes have it. This bill is passed and so cited.
With that, Mr. Speaker, we come to the end of our business for today. I'd like to thank the honorable members for their cooperation. I beg to move that this House do now be adjourned until Tuesday 9th of March at 10 a.m.
Question is that this honorable chairman be adjourned until Tuesday, the 9th day of March at 10 a.m. in the forenoon. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. Those against, please say no. We think the ayes have it. This honorable chamber stands adjourned until Tuesday, the 9th day of March at 10 a.m. in the forenoon.